Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've recorded meetings and conventions here in Southern California since 1998. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994, and I got sober in a small town called Santa Maria. I moved to Los Angeles when I had 5 years sober and started recording meetings shortly after I got here. In 2013, I started recording conventions. So please enjoy the channel. Please like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Just click right down there. Thank you.
This is a one-speaker meeting, and tonight our speaker is Cubby.
My name is Cubby. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Cubby. I thank Jim for asking me to speak. Speaking at AA meetings is my favorite thing to do. I enjoy speaking at meetings more than anything else in the world. It really turns me on. And I think the primary reason for that is that when I participate in Alcoholics Anonymous, I participate in the answer. And I never had an answer before, not a permanent living answer. And AA is the answer. If you're new, I'd like to just drop something at you. According to statistics, half of you are going to get drunk. Half the people in this room will probably get drunk. Many people in this room will die drunk. But the thing is, this happens to be a required course. For everybody in this room, you have no choice. You have to take this course sooner or later. Your only choice is when will you take it. You can't choose the curriculum. You can't change the program, the steps. The only thing you can choose is whether you're going to do it with pain or with joy. Otherwise, you have absolutely no choice in the world. And now that you feel welcome, get into a few things. I'd like to start with quoting something a friend of mine, Harvey Andrews, said. Noah Malpe used to say, the first 3 times you quote somebody, you have to give them credit. After that, it's yours. This is the second time I'm doing this. Anyway, Harvey said, if you love it, let it go. If it doesn't come back, hunt it down and kill it. We have to have some sort of spiritual axiom to start a meeting. Anyway, I suspect that my personal message, we all have the same message but express it uniquely, and I think mine is that you can be worse in sobriety than you ever were in your life and still survive and come out the other end. I did not think that was so my first 5 years of sobriety. When I used to hear old-timers talk about the problems they were having, I used to look so smugly superior at them, and, oh, if you just work your goddamn program, that wouldn't happen yet. And when every time they said that some was sicker than others, I'd look around the room at the sick ones. And then by the time I was about 8 or 10 years sober, I knew who they were talking about. And it's amazing. I can't believe that one person, and I'm only one, although there's, I don't know how many personalities, but they're all in this one little, very tiny little package, how one person can be so sick. And I figure I must be at least twins, because one person can't be as sick as I am. But this program takes care of everything. But somehow, some way, in the beginning, I realized that AA takes care of everything. And, you know, the only way you learn anything is to teach it. And you become what you teach. So I remember the first year or so of sobriety, at least once a day I was talking with someone who maintained that AA was okay for the drinking, but, yeah. And it was usually some guy who said he had to take care of his business life and so forth. So I was constantly given the opportunity to teach myself and to reinforce in my consciousness that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous takes care of everything. And I found that to be true. I've had 8 years of sobriety that were worse than any 8 years of my life. Absolute living hell. Going to bed at night begging God to let me die. Signs tacked up on the wall, I want to die, I want to die. I lost my physical health. My body started to consume itself. I was literally chewed up with rage. I tried to break a desk that was about 2 inches thick with my head. I was bounced off walls. I'd stay locked in my room 3 and 4 days without any food or water. And trudge the road of happy destiny? No, wait a second, I was stark raving mad. I lost my sanity. I lost my ability to work. I lost all my money and so forth. And eventually, after 15 years, my wife left. And I became a single parent. How in the hell that ever happened, I don't know. Well, for a year and a half, I've been a single parent, and it's one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's just fantastic. See, I believe, in spite of all appearances, I believe that recovery is progressive, not just on an individual basis, not only Alcoholics Anonymous, but on a universal level. Beyond the appearance of what we see out there, that it is progressive, this recovery. And personally, I can see that in that my father had nothing to give to me as a father. He lived to be 77 years old. I never knew the man until I got sober and I understood his disease, because he died drunk. So I had no so-called role model. And I spent more than 4 years in institutions, and I had the last rites at least 3 times that I know of. My father visited me once or twice. So I am being a million times better as a father to my son than my father was to me. Yet my father gave me more than he received. When he was 12 years old, he was all alone in the world, working in a coal mine. He was just a little guy. He never got to be more than 5'6". And he had no concept of being a father. So he gave me a hell of a lot more than he received. So he may not have given me much on some kind of absolute scale, but in human terms, he gave me everything he had, and more than he received. So there was a progression of recovery here. I see it in my own personal life, and I know that this cannot be seen by the appearances of his life or my life, because life is an inside job, and I cannot judge it from the appearances. So I believe there's a progression of recovery throughout the entire universe. Shortly before he died, I assume it was before he died, Einstein was asked, what do you think the most important question is facing the human race today? And the man was so amazing. He thought for a while. He didn't talk about starvation or smog or nuclear holocaust. This is what he said. Is the universe friendly? It's the most magnificent statement I've heard. Is the universe friendly? And I have come to realize and believe totally and absolutely that I am the universe. I live in a world that I project. There are even some theoretical physicists today who say the entire universe exists in the back of our eyeballs. So, whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm projecting is the world I'm going to live in. So it's very important for me to establish, is the universe friendly? Is it friendly? What kind of universe do I live in? What kind of universe am I projecting? In other words, am I projecting the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, or am I projecting my disease upon the universe? And depending upon any second of my life, where I'm coming from depends upon the world I will live in. It's either going to be a world of unconditional love, or it's going to be a world of hatred and disease, contempt, and absolute torture. And I spent a lot of years in that torturous world in sobriety. And the amazing thing is, I went to bed praying to die. I tried to break down houses with my head and all manner of thing going on. And I never once thought that a drink would make it better. Never. It just never occurred to me to drink. That's the power of this program. You see, my disease made it possible, and alcohol made it possible, for me to believe any lie I had to believe at any particular moment in my life. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous makes it possible for me to accept the truth at any particular moment of my life. The basic truth is, I am powerless over alcohol. In addition to that, I really don't want to drink. I really do not want to drink, because I know what would happen. As bad as I felt, I would feel a million times worse before that drink hit bottom. It's not like it used to was. It used to was a time when a drink made everything better, But things tend to get worser and worser if you're a drunk and you're drinking. Sometimes they get worser if you're drunk and you're not drinking, you know. You kind of pays your money and it takes your choice. But the closest thing I had to a spiritual experience was drinking. Now, I don't believe it's a coincidence that the word spirit means God and booze. Because I've always been a fractured, alienated human being. I've never felt at home or at peace. I've always felt like the battleground of the hounds of heaven and the hounds of hell. I was always ripped apart with conflict, and there was always a rage going on inside of my body. I've never been able to live peacefully and comfortably inside my own skin. And I've always felt like a scream looking for a mouth. And then I got worse, you see, you know. But a drink, can you remember the old days? God, I love alcohol more today than I ever have in my life, because the longer I'm sober, the more I understand the nature of my illness, the more I see what alcohol did for me. It made it possible for me to live in a world that's absolutely hostile to me, contrary to everything I want and or believe. And it retained what sanity I had for a while, and then eventually it killed me. Things got so bad that I couldn't resist the program of recovery that was offered to me. As the book says, the kit of spiritual tools laid at my feet. I drank for 26 years, and most of that time, for at least 25 of those years, I fought alcohol, because I was born with the knowledge that I can't drink. I knew all I had to do was wake up one morning and take a drink, and I would never stop drinking. And eventually that happened. So I fought alcohol. I didn't fight or try to control the amount of alcohol I drank. That's rather foolish. I mean, I don't think we could even conceive of that. But I tried to control the results, you know, those blackouts and those fights and all those dreadful things that happened, that terrible destruction. That's what I tried to control. And there were times when I was successful. If I could take the right amount of speed and smoke the right amount of pot, then I could drink for a couple of days without blacking out, without getting into these kind of troubles. And if I didn't black out, I never considered myself as being drunk. Now, the police have a different idea about that, you know. But if I can remember what happened, I just didn't consider myself drunk. So I guess I may have a different definition of intoxication. But I tried to control this in every way I could. And one of the ways I tried to control it was heroin. And that didn't, well, it worked. I mean, I was addicted to heroin for 6 years, and I didn't get drunk too often in those 6 years. And I thought that was rather marvelous at the time. And then I sobered up, and I realized that if shooting $100 a day worth of heroin, you don't have much need to drink. And in my particular case, I had to drink first before getting off it, because if I got off first and then drank, it would just come up. So I knew booze wasn't a problem. You know, the first step says you're powerless over alcohol and lives are becoming manageable, and I couldn't accept this. And by the time I was 18 years old, I had spent more than 3 years in a hospital, and I had 10 ribs cut out, a lung collapsed, a piece of another lung cut out, had the last rites 3 times, and I was partially blind, paralyzed, deaf, a few complications. And yet my life wasn't unmanageable by me, you see. I was a victim of circumstances. I was just very unlucky. And I certainly wasn't powerless over alcohol, and yet there were times in the hospital. Now, I was dying of TB, and I was supposed to be in bed. As a matter of fact, I was on death row. And I wasn't supposed to get out of bed. I wasn't supposed to do anything. I wasn't supposed to wash myself. I wasn't supposed to raise my hands. I wasn't supposed to comb my hair. And yet, more than once, I had somebody get me some clothes. And I was a teenager. I went in the hospital at the age of 18. I was taken off a ship in Germany at the age of 18. And I'd sneak out of the hospital. I'd climb over this big 10-foot fence, get on a bus, and get to the liquor store. This was out on Long Island near Rockaway in New York. And get a bottle and come back and climb back over the fence. And I thought I did that because I wanted to. You know? Never occurred to me that, you don't do things like that unless you have to. It never once occurred to me, because at all costs I had to defend my right to drink. I had to defend my right to drink because it was the only thing that made living possible for me. I just could not live in this world. So I could not accept anything about the first step. I could not accept my powerlessness over alcohol or the unmanageability of my life by me. And so one of the ways I fought it was with heroin. And I tried to kick this habit a few times in New York. And I checked in a hospital, and I just couldn't kick it. That lung I have left is a real New Yorker lung. I don't know if you know about New Yorkers, but New Yorkers, we like to hang out, you know. We hang out on street corners and candy stores, pool rooms, bars. You know. But we like to hang out. And so this lung I have left is a New Yorker lung. It hangs out, you know. And it doesn't do anything, you see. So I check in a hospital to kick this habit, and that goddamn lung would just hang there, not doing anything. And I'd turn blue, and I'd get into a panic, and I'd split, and I'd get back in the spoon. I just couldn't get rid of this habit. And the second step says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, which I take to mean that I'm crazy in front, and I need something. So, as an indication of the need of this step and the accuracy of the implied statement, I left New York and I moved to Hollywood to get away from drugs. You're laughing at me, yeah. You can tell I'm really swift. You know what I'm going to do? I'm having, what do you call these things, headbands? That I'm going to wear every time I speak. It's going to say disaster area right across here, you know. I believed it. I got a couple of dozen Dolphine, got on a plane, came out here to kick my habit. And I did. I got free of heroin by courtesy of the LA Sheriff's Department. They have a subgroup in there known as the Narcs, and I walked into their loving arms, and they strapped me down in solitary, and I kicked my habit, you know, guaranteed. You want to kick something? Go to jail, get strapped down, and whatever it is, you'll be free of it for a while anyway. But I can remember two things. One, I knew I was going to die, and I really didn't particularly care, because I was very, very tired by this time. I was perhaps 38 years old and very, very tired. You know, that kind of tired each and every one of us has experienced, that kind of tired that chews away at the marrow of your bones, where you can't even lift your eyelids. It's just too much effort. And I was that kind of tired, so I didn't particularly care about the dying part. And when they closed that cell door, I felt safe. As you know, there's something very substantial about the sound of a cell door closing, you know. It's very sturdy, you know. Nobody's going to knock that sucker down, man, you know. So I had my first experience with surrender, although I had no idea that's what I was doing. And after 2 weeks, they asked me if I wanted to come out, and I said no. No, man. I stayed in there. I stayed in there another 2 weeks. God, a 4x8 room all by myself, and that limits your responsibility, man, you know. Didn't have to do much thinking. 3 times a day they fed me. Fine, solid. Swing with that. And then they kicked me out, put me out in the regular population. I was there a month, and then a lawyer came, and eventually I went into a hospital for a month. And I had 90 days sober and almost completely clean. And then they did that thing to me, you know. They're always doing these things. They let me loose. They let me out of this place. Jesus, I was out there all alone again, on the streets in this world I don't understand. So anyway, to make a long story short, I spent the next 15 months sitting in a green chair, emotionally involved with Ernest and Julio Gallo. And I thought everything's fine because, you see, before I got busted, I was shooting $100 a day worth of stuff. Now, for $5 a day, I could buy all the wine I could drink, all the potato chips I could eat, and all the cigarettes I could smoke. Now, pay attention. I may ask questions. I was saving $95 a day. You dig? That's over $34,000 a year. See? So I could spend 6 years in this chair drinking Gallo wine. I'd have $70,000 saved. I was swinging. I can believe any lie I have to believe, man. At any particular moment of my life, just give me a gallon of Gallo and tell me anything. I'll believe it. Yeah. So anyway, I was living with a young lady who sent a woman home with 3 children and had no place to live. They're on welfare, and welfare said if they didn't have a place to live by that night, they would take the woman's children away. So we moved them in. And this fellow came to visit her. And this one Friday night, he visited me. And I remember he sat across the room from me, and he read. And I don't know what the hell he was reading, but he was reading something. And I guess he was there all night long. What I do remember is at some point in the night, he tossed a book on my lap, and he said, "You read to me, I'm tired." So I read to him, and what I remember is I stopped after every line. And I said, "I'll be goddamn, that's right. You know, that's the way it is. Yeah, son of a bitch." Anyway, it turned out that in a blackout, I read the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And evidently, I identified with the problem in Chapter 3 and the answer in Chapter 5. And he took me to a meeting that night. It was a Saturday night. He took me to a meeting, and I've been clean and sober ever since. And that was on the 29th of March, 1969. And I just hated everything about that meeting. I couldn't believe what was going on. And yet when he took me home, I heard myself say, "Can I go to another meeting?" So my experience forces me to believe that miracles are possible without my consent. Lucky, huh? Lucky, man. You know, we talk about sobriety here, and for the people who are new, you don't have to be aware that you want to be sober. Let me tell you that. You don't have to be aware that you want sobriety more than anything else in the world. But it's going to take a while for you to find that out. And you're going to have to be sober for a while to find it out. It worked that way for me. I was sober 8 months before I realized that before coming to AA, I had to drink. I thought for 26 years I was doing the things I wanted to do. I had to be sober 8 months to have the slightest idea that I really did have a disease. And it took me maybe 10 years to start to understand the nature of my illness. So you may not think you want sobriety, but you don't know what you really think if you're anything like me. So hang around and see what happens. Don't take a drink one day at a time and hang out with us and see what happens. You see, if you want it to be, the war is over. And you can sign a peace treaty right now. You can sign a peace treaty with yourself right now. And we'll help you put that into effect. So anyway, in the second chapter of our book, it says, in their personal stories, each individual tells in his own words, from his own point of view, how he established his relationship with God, which, of course, is the single most important thing in our program. Everything is designed to lead us to that. And over and over and over and over, the book tells us that. As a matter of fact, it says we are never cured of our disease. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And so I would like to share with you how that came about in my life and share with you how I received what I consider the 5 most important gifts of my life. The gift of sobriety, the gift of recovery, the gift of prayer, the gift of love, and the gift of a God of my very own. And when I say gift, I don't mean I was given something I did not have, because I know from my experience in this program that I was given everything there is at the day of creation. But what happens through the process of uncovering and discarding, I become aware of having these gifts. And I build up a conscious contact with them so they can be utilized. I was given the gift of sobriety that first night, and I didn't drink for 30 days. 30 days. Boy, you know, the years go by in a flash, but the days are endless, especially when you don't drink. At the end of 30 days, I was stark raving sober. You know, the only thing worse than drinking is not drinking, right? Because you take away the most important thing in an individual's life, you must replace it with something of value. You know, nature cannot and will not tolerate a vacuum. So you take away the booze, whatever I'm left with the hole that I started with. So it must be replaced with something of value. Otherwise, I have no choice. I have to go back to drinking. And that's where the program of Alcoholics Anonymous comes in. It is the thing of value that replaces and fulfills each and every need I've ever had or ever will have. And so at the end of 30 days, I did the one thing I knew I would never do. I asked for help. You know? And I asked for help at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous And of course the help was instantly and automatically there. I did not know why at the time, but the reason for that is that the answer is in the asking. The answer is in the asking. It's just that simple, you know. This is so simple that I just pass it by constantly. As I understand it, there's two reasons for that. One is that when I ask for help, what I'm saying is I give up. I don't know what to do, you tell me. So in other words, it's an act of surrender. And also, there's no separation between cause and effect. None whatsoever. No separation between cause and effect. The answer is in the asking. Which means, of course, there's no separation between cause and effect. There's no separation between me and that which caused me. You can call it God or whatever you want. And then the only reason I think that I am separate from this thing that created me is because of a disease called alcoholism. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous makes it possible for me to discard these lies so I can get closer to experiencing the truth of that oneness. So I was given the gift of recovery when I asked for help. Then I came face to face. Is that 10 to 9 already? Well, okay, well, see what we get in here. So then I came face to face with this thing called the third step and this thing called prayer, and everybody telling me that God's the answer. And I had an attitude, man, you know, like I had an attitude up the kazoo. After my last operation, I was in a coma for 4 days, and at one point in this 4-day period, I opened my eyes as the chaplain walked in the room. And I stayed conscious long enough to shake my head no and watch him leave. Because I was determined that if I died, I was going to die giving God the finger. And if there was such a thing called God, I couldn't wait to die so I could spit in its face. And the kindest thing I ever said about God is that it's dog spelled backwards. So you tell me all I got to do is turn my will and my life over to this thing. You know, there's a sticky wicket, man, you know. And AA is the only place I know where that can be done, where a hatred can be turned into a love affair, not by taking religious instructions or studying theology or dogma, but by not taking one drink one day at a time and hanging out with a bunch of sober drunks, and that's what happened to me. I didn't know what to do with this thing you people call prayer, so I copied the third step prayer and the St. Francis prayer from the book. I tacked them on the wall and I read them, and I read them and I read them. And then I wanted to kneel and pray, and I couldn't, until I took my fifth step. When I was 4 months sober, took my fifth step. When I finished, my sponsor showed me what pages to read in the big book to take the 6 and 7. I did exactly what it suggests. And then spontaneously, without thinking about it, I was on my knees taking the 7th step. And that day I was given the gift of prayer, which I believe is the most precious gift that we can receive from our Creator. We use a lot of words, at least I use a lot of words in prayer, but I think the most I can really ask for with words is to receive what is already given and to accept what is already there. Because I believe the real prayer is the song of love that my heart sings to this thing we call God. And I believe that this thing we call God sings a song of love to me. And I believe that song of love is heard in every heart throughout the world and is heard throughout the universe. And I believe each and every one of us gets here with a broken heart. I think that's the thing we spent a lifetime trying to fix. And that song of love that is sung here in the hearts of Alcoholics Anonymous mends that broken heart and heals the sick minds that come here. And I know from my experience that there is nothing to get, that there's only everything to give, and that AA is the perfect place to give it all away. I also know that when we pray, or when I pray, I don't just pray to God, I pray from God. And so it's a cycle, and this song of love goes on and on and on. Today I believe that I am God's song of love. I think each and every one of us are. Perhaps a unique tune, each one a little different, but each and every one is God's song of love. With the 9th step, I was given the gift of love. When I was 6 months sober, I realized that I didn't hate this thing we call God, but in fact I love God with all my heart and all my soul. And it was an amazing revelation. I couldn't understand what it was all about all the previous years until I read AA Comes of Age for the first time. In the back of the book, they quote an old Spanish philosopher. And that line that they quote is, "Those who deny God deny him because of their despair at not finding him." And I suddenly and instantly understood my entire life. And I understood that attitude You know, if I can't have it, it's not worth having. And all these things that I wanted and knew in my heart I couldn't have because I didn't deserve them, I had to believe they weren't worth having in the first place, and I don't have anything to do with them. And the first thing on that list was God. And so I discovered that there was a despair, and it wasn't hatred, and it was fear, and all that was replaced with the unconditional love of Alcoholics Anonymous. And with the 12th step, we have the greatest guarantee that any human being can have. It says, having had a spiritual awakening, as the result of these steps, we're working towards one thing, a spiritual awakening, not anything else. We're not looking for psychological insights or financial success. Having had a spiritual awakening, it doesn't say you may or may not have one. It's a flat-out statement. You do these things, you'll be awakened to the Spirit of God within you, period. And you will also realize that the Spirit of yourself and the Spirit of God are one. And the only thing preventing us from experiencing that oneness is a disease called alcoholism. And it's a flat-out guarantee. There's no way that you can take these steps without having that result, because there's no separation between the cause and the effect. I think we have an ongoing experience here. I believe, as the book says, that self-centered fear is the very nature of our illness, and that when we get here, there is nothing but I want, I need, I gotta, I shoulda. You know, the demands of the disease make everything else impossible. No matter how many ideals we may have or may have had, it's impossible to live up to them because of the very nature of our illness. And it has nothing to do with being good or bad or right or wrong, because those things in truth do not exist. It simply has to do with an illness, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about that at the time. And we get here, we feel more isolated, more alone, more filled with self-loathing than any human being can possibly feel. And we get here, and the very first word of the AA program is we. We admit it. That's the very first word. And with that, I believe the I of our disease starts to crumble. The very foundations of the disease are weakened. And then we, who get here for all intents and purposes godless, because we know if there is a loving God, it doesn't want to have anything to do with us. That's even if we have the courage to believe in a God. And at the end of the meeting, these people reach out and they hold our hand. And they say something absolutely incredible. They say, "Our Father." And for the first time, and God knows how long, perhaps in our entire lives, we are included in this thing we call life. We are included in this thing called love. We are included in this thing called God. We are a part of. Regardless of what we may think at that moment or what we may feel, the process has started, because the eye of our disease cannot withstand the unconditional love of the we of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think the most important spiritual step I have ever taken is that step from I to we. Very simply, I get drunk, we stay sober. I think it's that simple. I have come to believe that that is the only spiritual step that I can take, that anything else is in God's hands. That all that happens after I take that step is an increased awareness of the we. As I uncover and discover and discard the lies I've accepted in my lifetime, through the process of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I become more conscious of and aware of the we. And I believe that will continue until in time I experience the one. I think it's simply for me, this whole process can be summed up very simply. And that is that love is the fulfillment of the law. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God dwelleth in him. I know absolutely that to live in Alcoholics Anonymous is to live in God. Thank you very much, and God bless.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. to install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.